And there is a saying, we're made for it. And it means that we, as human beings, are also made for the challenges. We're not just made for, ta-da, life is all, when everything works out. We have built in to our DNA and system skills that allow us to rise above, to be challenged and not be broken by the challenge, but figure things out, find solutions, cope. We're also made for that. So sometimes, it's about reframing.
Welcome to NICU Heroes, a podcast produced exclusively for NICU professionals, with me, Kathryn Whitaker, as your host. I'm the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit dedicated to providing free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a baby's NICU stay. As a NICU professional, you've been well trained to care for the tiniest and the sickest babies every day. While a NICU parent's scars are not as visible, those parents are often as fragile as their babies, requiring patience, guidance, and encouragement to ensure that they are mentally, emotionally, and physically prepared to endure the pressure of a NICU stay. NICU Heroes is dedicated to helping NICU professionals like you better understand, support, and nurture the entire NICU family. Well, howdy gang, welcome back to the podcast. I gotta be honest, as I was putting together the 2025 schedule and thinking about guests that I knew would help you be a better NICU professional, this is the guest that she was the very first one that I reached out to, primarily because our conversation over on our parent-facing podcast, NICU Babies Parent Support, that one we focused on big emotions with siblings, like how do you handle siblings who are struggling having a baby or a sibling in the NICU? How do you do that as a parent? And our conversation was so good. I immediately, as soon as we stopped recording on that one, I said, I have to have you on our NICU professional podcast, because there's so many things I know that you deal with as a NICU professional. You're definitely caring for that baby, but that mom, that dad, that grandparent, that caregiver, along with their family members, particularly other children that they may have, are very much a part of your purview too. They are very much a part of who you are serving and helping along the way. And I thought if you could better understand kids' normal reactions to hard things, how can a parent navigate through this really difficult thing, and how can you affirm them at the bedside? How can you give them good resources? That's what today's podcast is all about. I'm so excited. Dr. Siggie has some great resources. They're listed in the show notes if you're interested in passing those along to your parents. But I'm just so impressed with her joyful demeanor and the expertise in what she shares. And she throws down some serious zingers in this episode. You're going to love listening to it. My guest today is Dr. Siggie Cohen. She's known as the Child Whisperer for her unparalleled depth of insight in working with children. For more than 35 years, she's worked extensively with thousands of children and families, first as a teacher and then as a child development specialist. Dr. Siggie has a private practice. She lectures and teaches throughout the Los Angeles area. Her approach has proven successful in helping parents and teachers deepen their understanding of children's behaviors so that she can support them through the entire range of emotional challenges, including behavioral difficulties, transitions, and trauma. And that's why I have her here. She is also the mother of 3 kids. This is an amazing conversation, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So let's get to it. Well, I am always excited to have somebody. I know that you haven't been on the NICU Heroes podcast, but I loved you so much on our parent-facing podcast. It was such a good conversation that I looked at my calendar. I was like, we have to have you back. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Yes, excited to see what else, right?
Yeah.
What else we can offer.
Well, I know that you have so much experience with kids, but I always like to give people a little bit of the why I asked you. So maybe give people a little bit of background. I know that you started in education and then now you're in child development. So kind of give people an idea of the journey from there to where you are now.
Right. So I can say that overall, I've always worked with children, whether directly in education, mainly early childhood, but not just. And then I moved to teach in college, and then I kind of combined it all. with, my passion for teaching and my ability to understand the complexity of the family dynamic, bringing in obviously more education, more experience. And here is where I am today, working still with families in so many different capacities, still feeling honored to be involved in people's lives and able to help them.
Well, I love in your bio, it says like you're the child whisperer. I had so many people when they found out that I interviewed you the first time, they're like, I love following her on social media. Like, I feel like she has such great advice. So, how did you get from what you do just in your regular everyday life to being like, maybe I should share this with the internet? And how did that come about? And what have been some of the fruits of that?
I think that some of it has to do with the fact that when I was working in my office or even in front of a classroom, I realized that it's not about repeating myself. I realized that a lot of what I deal with and what people deal with is really universal. And I felt that if I can help one person, one family, one child, what would be that like if I could do the exact same thing with many more? And I think I always had some passion for writing, so I was always thinking about ways to write parenting courses. I did teach a lot of parenting courses over the many years, so I had so much material. Teaching, especially college, even teaching young children, is a form of performance. So one day
Right.
I just decided to turn the camera on and speak to the camera. And it was awful in the beginning, but
That's the way we all are. Nobody's good when they first start at something.
exactly. But even those clips that I put on Facebook many years ago, resonated with people. People were like, oh, this is so, this works and this feels good and so on. So, all in all, then I ran this, or I was looking to work with someone because I realized that all of these things that I can do, I still don't really know how to tie them together with a bow, It's more
Yeah.
like I needed another person that can really solidify all of the content and me and pull it together to what it became. And I ran this by many people. Hey, I'm looking for a producer. Hey, I just kind of like, and one of these people first said no. And then a few weeks later came back and said, I thought about it. Let's do it.
And
And
here
it's
you
my
are.
niece, actually.
Oh, of
So
course. I love that.
it's all
The
in the
younger ones
family.
always know what to do. Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah. She was then a young mom herself and just kind of like switching careers. And she brought a lot into this and together. And also, obviously, being comfortable and her knowing me. And it is what it is today. So I'm grateful to her. And I'm happy that this is definitely working out for so many people.
Well, it seems appropriate that the person who talks about child development is also working with a family member to share how we can navigate parenthood because whether you have had a NICU stay or you haven't had a NICU stay, we all encounter hard, sometimes traumatic events. And so figuring it out feels a little overwhelming. So if there can be like someone who's sort of a little bit further down the road that can help navigate that for you, or at least give you things to think about, or maybe you should try this, it's a huge help. So maybe let's dive into that a little bit. So a lot of our people that listen to this particular podcast are NICU professionals. So they're at the bedside. And while their patient is the baby, they are also managing family members, whether it's parents, grandparents that are the caregiver. And then oftentimes they will find that there may be siblings involved in all that. So they may be old enough to come into the NICU or they may not be, but they are certainly hearing it's a real relationship kind of caregiving role. So Dr. Siggie, as you're thinking about a NICU nurse that's at the bedside and they're working with the patient, but they're also working with the parent, how or what's the suggestion that you would give to them to sort of alleviate the pressure to do everything perfectly as a parent because it feels exacerbated when you're in a situation where everything feels out of control. So I know that while that may be semi-specific to a NICU family, we have all been in a situation where we feel overwhelmed and stressed out.
Absolutely. And maybe I'll start with the nurse who, like you're saying, her patient is this baby and she knows everything that she needs to know and do for this patient of hers. But then she's thrown into a territory where she has to extend herself in so many additional ways. So she is probably also feeling the anxiety, the stress. All these family members are looking at her maybe for answers, to hold their hand, like the name of your podcast, right? And to manage on a regular basis what they're going through. So when you say no one's perfect, let's actually start with that. No one's perfect. The nurse is sort of scrambling to figure out how to help. She needs to tap into her own personal resources. And that requires her to maybe listen to something like this, refer to another person, a mentor, her support system, her life experience, right? And then everyone else also needs not just to look up to her and gear everything towards her. She's got a lot going already, and her main role is to keep this baby not just alive, well, thriving, and obviously out of there as soon as possible. So I think it takes a village. We are all this one big village when we are in the midst of such turmoil. And we all need to remember that not one person can be the go-to for everything. So maybe we also refer to other people and kind of, not just ease up on her, but it also helps us, because if we're constantly coming to this one person, it's overwhelming, not just to them, but also to us, because what if that person can't actually give everything?
Yeah. So if you've probably heard the term, I'm gonna call it mom guilt, but I'm gonna also include dads in this too, this parent guilt that we have of, okay, so my baby's in the NICU. I'm trying to do things maybe not perfectly, but maybe the best that I can do. But then maybe I also have other children at home. So how do I process as a human, as a parent, this really hard thing? But then also I have these other children who may or may not be able to visit the NICU, but this really hard thing is happening and it's affecting mom and dad. Dr. Siggie, what would you, I guess, counsel that family and by extension the NICU nurse to maybe help this family sort of, I'm going to help you process what you're feeling as a person, but then also how do you talk to your kids about this really scary thing? We'll dive into that a little bit deeper, but right now, I guess, how do you do that well so that they are less traumatized than if you just sort of brush it under the rug?
Right. So obviously, you know who your children are, age-wise as well. So what they can handle in terms of information. And then you start with the very basics. So not just you let them know that this is what is happening to their little baby sibling right now and how so many people are helping this baby. But right now, what we're all doing is actually looking for what we need rather than what we want first. So the guilt comes because we're all overwhelmed with the options. There's so many things that we feel like we need to do, we want to do, we have to do. It's like this buffet. We're constantly faced with the 24/7 buffet, having to pick and choose from it. It's overwhelming. We don't need a buffet. Every once in a while, it's nice. But most of the time, we just need a couple of items for a meal. That's what I mean. Let's learn or relearn to bring ourselves back to basic. What are the needs that are being met? My children are cared for. That's huge. It's no small thing at all. And I don't mean that by, you have what you need. It's not in a dismissive way. It's in a realistic way. So I know you cannot help yourself but be hit by this guilt. Try to also help yourself by talking to this guilt. This guilt is trying to make me feel something that I'm supposedly not doing right now, but I actually am doing a lot of things right. So can I chit chat with that guilt? You're making me feel bad. But wait, what am I doing wrong? Oh, you're not spending so much time with your kids, the other ones. You're right, I'm not. Do they need me all the time? No, they have school. They have other family members. They have each other. And this is on a regular basis. I'm not spending 24/7 with my kids, even under best circumstances,
Right,
right?
right.
Yeah. So I mean, like that, learn to literally chat with that guilt and bring back the basics and check them to see that many of them are being filled. And then sometimes you have to sit with the emotion. Right now, this is hard. This is hard. We're all going through something. Can't take it away, can't make it go away. It's here. What are we already doing? Sometimes you can talk to yourself this way, and sometimes you can talk even with your kids. What are we already doing that make us feel somewhat okay? Not like everything is terrible, only a few things.
I think you remind me of something that as parents, we want to protect our kids. It's our natural instinct. We want to protect our kids from hard things. But as I look back, and we've been out of the NICU for 15 years, and as I look back at now my older children who at the time when our son was in the NICU were itty bitty, and now they are 19, 18 and above now. And I think many of their life lenses, many of the things that they've chosen to do, how they approach life, was reframed when their brother was in the NICU. So what I thought was destroying them was actually really reorienting them, but also rebuilding a different foundation. I worried that like if I didn't do it perfectly, that somehow I was also messing up my other kids. But in actuality, I was sort of opening the door for them to learn how to deal with hard things. And we did it very imperfectly, but I'm seeing the fruits of that 15 years later. So I think maybe thank you for reminding me that like this can also be a real moment of definition for other kids that are in the family that are sort of seeing this unfold.
Yes, absolutely. And there is a saying, we're made for it. And it means that we, as human beings, are also made for the challenges. We're not just made for, ta-da, life is all, yeah, when everything works out. We have built in to our DNA and system skills that allow us to rise above, to be challenged and not be broken by the challenge, but figure things out, find solutions, cope. We're also made for that. So sometimes, it's about reframing. And here's another thing, because when we as parents feel that mommy guilt, daddy guilt, maybe moms feel it much more, we then pity our children. And feel sorry for someone is not a good thing, right?
Yeah.
We pity them. Oh, and here's where I want you to look at the challenges. Absolutely. It's difficult. Let's recognize, but not with pity. Empathy is not pity. Empathy is an
That's good.
embrace, and it's empowering. Empathy is like, yeah, this is very tough. Pity is like, oh, poor you. And it makes someone small and exactly the opposite of what they need to be right there in the face of a challenge. Strong, capable, trusting.
I love that because it feels like sometimes in the NICU that at least this is the way we felt is oftentimes we would get another diagnosis, another specialist, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" And but I remember there was a nurse that came in one day, I was crying, it was some horrible diagnosis that day, and she came in and she said, "You know, it's okay to, like, embrace the suck." She said, like, "It's okay for it to be hard." And she said, "Just let it all out, and then tomorrow we'll get up and do it again." And it was nice to be seen and not like she wasn't saying, "Oh, this is so horrible," like and I think it was her natural instinct that she's like, "Girl, just cry it out, like, it's okay, and then tomorrow we're gonna do the next thing." I had never thought about the empathy versus pity part. Thank you. This is why I have you on the podcast. So, how Dr. Siggy, when you have kids who cannot come to the NICU? So I'm talking about maybe kids who are a little bit younger, who know that something is off, know that something is hard, but they can't see it, unlike maybe like a natural disaster or something's happening at home that they can lay eyes on. How do you help kids that can't see the trauma understand to some degree how hard it may be without completely overwhelming them?
Yeah. So children are very sensory, and that includes visual. And it is true that they need the visual in order to take information in. And when the visual is not there, like they can't see, they begin to, in a way, create their own visions and their own ideas. And it's not always a good thing. So they have incredible imagination, but we also know what the imagination can do and how it can exaggerate and maximize and create different things. If you cannot bring them to actually see, like, look at, just look around, not like this, but just kind of open eyes, looking around, maybe asking questions. Can you show them videos? Can you sit with them and show them and explain things? You don't have to overwhelm. And if they get up and, oh, mommy, I'm hungry, or I want to do, it's perfectly fine. Let them take in as much as they need, but give them some visual information, because otherwise, yes, when we say they're kept in the dark is where they actually become maybe a little more stressed and anxious. It's like, what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So they're not so scared, by the way, by all the wires and all the sounds and so on. I've had children so many times ask questions about disabilities, not just a wheelchair, but even some deformity, some, people with different types of bodies and so on. And kids are very literal and they ask direct questions, and it's a little tough. But that's when they actually are fine with it, because they ask, they get the answer. Yeah, I was born without an arm, or yeah, I'm in a wheelchair, or I'm a little person. You're right. You noticed that. Thank you. And then they suddenly are like, oh, what's this button? And what does this do? And and then they talk about, do you like chocolate? Right? They move on. They pass sort of like through this, what we think is a major hurdle. It's not. So if you can bring them, show them, talk to them about it as much as they want, explain things, the roles of all these people and the machines. Technology is fascinating. This can be like, wow, look at that. And this does this and this does that.
Yeah, now there's cameras in NICUs where you can actually get on the feed and like see your baby. It makes sense. Like that might be an opportunity to invite your other kids in to see that. I think as parents, we're thinking like we're the ones that receive all the bad information or all the hard news, right? And so when we share that with our kids, we're sort of sometimes thinking, well, then they're going to share the same, but they don't. You're right. Like they do to some degree recognize that, and I think it's this fear of the unknown, like what they can't see, that is actually more difficult than if you just tell them, obviously age appropriate, and every kid's different. We had our oldest was 8, and so he was able to come into the NICU, and I was super anxious about that. I got to be honest, Dr. Siggie, I was like, is this going to scar my kid? Like,
Sure.
I've already got one, and is bringing him in here going to be detrimental? And so it was something that I really struggled with. So I guess maybe can we speak into that a little bit of, if you have an opportunity to maybe bring an older child in, how do you best prepare them for what they're going to see, but not just completely overwhelm them so that they're like, that is the scariest place I've ever been in, even though you
Right.
might be feeling that, as the parent.
Right. So you can talk about actually the different emotions that that child might experience, because you already know. So one, yes, this can be a little scary. I'm not sure that it's all scary, but some of it will be scary. Some of it is actually kind of interesting. So you can be curious. You can ask questions. So show involvement. And also compartmentalize it in such a way that they have a way out. And by the way, when you're done, we can actually leave. So don't feel like you have to stay there. This is not, you're not sent to any place where you have to, kind of like be confined or restricted in any way whatsoever. A lot of it is up to you. So as long as you want to stay, you can stay. As you feel curious, you can ask questions, you want to know. Maybe sometimes you're done, and then later on, you can ask some questions like, wait, mom, what was that? Or what did they do? Because sometimes it takes time to process. So we can let them know that as well. It's not done, like, have to sort of like pull it all through right then and there. There is continuity. We can still talk about it later.
I do love the, I wish I had thought of that. Like, when you're done, just tell me and we'll leave. Because we sometimes decide as parents when our kids are done, like, oh, well, if this is overwhelming for me, then at this point it's going to be too much. But I actually hadn't thought about giving our kids the authority, I guess, the bandwidth to say, like, hey, when you're done, tell me, you know.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes NICUs have different rules about like when you can be there, how long siblings can stay, but it's nice to give a little bit of that autonomy to your own kids.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't
Yeah.
even thought about that. That's awesome. So, how do you, Dr. Siggy, develop a good like I guess what are your strategies or advice when you're trying to develop a good support system for your family when you're going through a hard thing? I mean, obviously in this case we're talking about a NICU stay, but every family goes through hard things. What do you think are like key components to have a good support network so that you can navigate the hard thing better?
You need to identify the people around you that are not adding to your fear. And I'm saying that kindly because sometimes you
No.
can't. It can be your mom, it can be your sister, it can be
Right.
even your best friend, like, oh, what? Right. And what's
Mhm.
But you want to identify that. It doesn't mean you cut them off. It just means that you want to know that some people will have their own anxiety and stress about it, and they can't help themselves but somehow share it with you in this kind of way. But then it ends up on you. Like you are the one supposedly having to now comfort them. No, it's okay, and this and that. So
Yeah.
learn who these people are and not cutting them off, not even stopping them from being who they are, because sometimes that just leads to a lot of other,
That's a whole other thing, yeah.
it's a whole other thing. Learn to accept it with the dose that works for you, knowing that you shouldn't take too much of it. And then look at the people that are actually providing the sounding board, the grounding, the firmness of comfort, and and are there for you. If you want to talk about whatever, let's talk. If you need me to do something, tell me what to do. Sometimes it's like that. Identify the people that are not there. Oh, I wish I could help, or I'm so sorry. Again, pity is no support. Empathy is proactive. It's like, what can I do? But sometimes you can tell me, I'm not like going to walk in, okay, here, I'll buy, I'll go, I'll do. It's like, tell me what you need from me. I'm happy to do that. So learn to identify these people and actually rely on them, because it's not just helping you, it's helping them as well to become the right kind of support for you.
I remember a NICU nurse telling us one time, one of my friends came up. She was married to a medical doctor and she was a rock star and came up. I remember after she left, the NICU nurse looked at me and she goes, that is a good friend. You need to have her come more often. And it was nice to hear some good affirmation to be like, oh, what I felt as a friend, like I knew that she was good for me, but I didn't realize how good she was for me. And so to hear someone from the outside like recognize that and to be like, you need more people like that in your life, that was affirming. Or, sometimes people would come in and they would leave and she would be like, "They are a lot. How you doing?"
Yes,
A little heart check, like, sometimes we don't always know what's good for us, and so to have someone from the outside sort of be a good observer and be a good affirmer for the things that are, can really be helpful. So this, sometimes there's this balance, Dr. Sige, where you've got a parent who is maybe able to be in the NICU for a little bit, but then they find themselves working, right? So they are really relying on the NICU and you've got a lot of balls in the air. When you're thinking about that particular ball of like this working part, how do you make sure that the time that you spend at home with your kids who are at home is good, healthy time with them? Like how do you make the decisions of, okay, I'm going to let this go because I need to focus on this because this kid needs that? Like, how do you discern or how am I best present to the family at home when I'm at home, even though I have all these other fires, that I'm sort of juggling on the other side?
Yeah. So sometimes it's by recognizing the here and now and staying in the here and now.
Yeah.
What can I do right here, right now? Because I know your mind is racing to all these things that are still out there, but all you can do is truly be just here and now. And then the other thing is, remember the buffet? It's not about quantity, it's about quality. We don't need so much. We need something that is really valuable. So whether it's one meal together, one outing for whatever, running an errand or watching my child and, in a gym class or doing whatever. Sometimes it's even just sitting with them while they're doing homework, and rather than, being on top of them or, being on edge, kind of like, oh, this is so sweet. I love watching you do your homework. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes, it's in the small stuff. Do you want a game of Uno? Do you want to make cookies with me in the kitchen? It only takes 30 minutes or less. How about bedtime tonight? This will be when I'm there with you. So think the here and now and quality versus quantity, which helps you lessen how overwhelmed you are and thinking that you've got to be everywhere at all times and do it all, which is impossible.
Oh, I like that it helps you lessen the stress that you have in your own life. Hey, you mentioned this on a reel. I don't know if it was recently, if it was a little while ago, but you were talking about how parents answer questions with their kids. And you're like, we often give them, like, we over answer the questions. So can you talk a little bit about how we answer our kids' questions? Because I know my kids had a lot of questions and I always struggled with, what do I say and how do I say it? And not just
Yeah.
about the NICU, but just honestly, just about everything. Like, answering questions with kids is tricky. So let's talk about that for a second.
You're right, because they trigger something completely different in us.
Yeah.
So learn to notice the different questions your children are asking you. So sometimes it's, I think the reel was about the why, but
Yes.
why, right? Well, we
Mhm.
can't do this right now because blah, 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 but why? Didn't I just So it's almost like, wait, my child doesn't understand? Yeah, no, don't minimize your child, because you know how intelligent they are and how they retain information and how they know exactly the answer. So if you gave the answer once, sometimes it's a repeated answer from yesterday and the day before. And it's kind of like, yeah, no, we're not doing this. And we don't even have to say, I think you know. So a lot of times pause and think to yourself, my child is constantly asking me, what is 1+1, while they already know the answer? Then I shouldn't give them the answer. It's like, sweetie, you know the answer. And I don't mean, this is 1+1 metaphorically. So learn to give them back the question and promote or advocate them responding, because this way it does create a bit more independence. This why that they lean on with makes you and them think that things can change. The more they'll ask, something different will happen. No, if it's raining, we're not going swimming. It's like end of conversation, sweetie. And I think you know that. So yeah, so this is one kind of, but there's sometimes questions that they ask us that trigger our either defense or offense mechanism. And we immediately look at all the stuff. How can you say that? I just had a mom like that yesterday. And when I said that to her, she's like, oh my God, you're so right. Like, it just triggers me. And immediately I'm like, how can you say that? I do so much. So children can definitely trigger guilt, shame, remorse. They can do that. Not necessarily they're aiming to hurt you, but they do have an agenda. And their agenda is to get what they want, and they're going to try it at all costs.
They're like,
So
well, I asked it this way, but maybe if I ask her at a different time and slightly different, I will get a different answer, right?
exactly, yes, because their main agenda is to somehow make things work for them as much as they can. Especially nowadays when we are so much, we cater to them so much, right? Yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk about that in a second.
That's a whole other conversation. So learn to pause before you immediately jump to answer. And sometimes you can see, repeating the question. Oh, what an interesting question. I wonder. And now talk to them about them. Lots of these questions are projections or sort of like needs that, or implications of something else that is there. So ask them, I'm curious. Why do you want to know? Where does it come from? Not in any interrogative way, but more like, yeah, can you tell me more? Of course, I'm happy to answer. Let me think about it. Learn to take a step back rather than jump right in full force, giving them an answer as if the question is really about that.
And I think you also, you've touched on this before of sometimes we give them choices when there's not really a choice. Like when we're having dialogue with our kids about whether it's something hard or something that they do in their daily life, when we start to ask and have this dialogue between them, we often think sometimes we give them more information and then we allow them to make decisions like, do you want to do this? When the answer is going to be yes. Right? Why do we keep asking that question? So I think on the other side, I want to flip it to the other side. Like as a parent, when you start to frame questions with your kids, what advice can you give us so that we don't give them choices that aren't necessarily a choice, but rather give them a choice that feels empowering, that we can move forward in whatever we're trying to do? This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Hand to Hold is here to support your NICU in two ways. One, you can refer your NICU parents to us for support. Or two, you can bring dedicated Hand to Hold support to your NICU, either in person or virtually. Our support consists of one-to-one group and educational resources, including our family-focused podcast, NICU Babies Parent Support. For more information, visit handtohold.org and click on NICU Professionals.
Yes, so first think about the yes and no questions that you're asking. And I really want every parent to pause and think, how many yes, no questions am I asking my child?
Do you want us to answer that question? Because I think I don't want to answer that question right now.
Exactly. So yes and no questions are based on moment to moment response. They're not very thought through unless I have a lot of experience, unless I really am able to understand the implications of my yes or no. But if I'm 3 or 4, or even sometimes 7, yes, no, and then, wait, I do, or I don't, or no. Here's the thing. It's, minimize the yes, no questions and see if you can reframe them to not just your child answering yes or no, even like the fun ones. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, you're playing with this. Oh, you're doing that. Like constant questions, so many yes, no questions, work to eliminate some. And then here's another part of the questioning is more like when you ask a question, would you like the yellow or the green? And I'd like you to think about it. Oh. Because how many young children, I want this pajama. And you give, no, I want this, right? This is what I mean. Their answers are based on moment to moment to moment, just an impulse. What we want is to not rely on that impulsivity, because how do you actually rationalize impulse? You can't. And now you're arguing, but you want it, but this, yeah, but I'm 4 and I really didn't think this through. And I actually don't care because right now I'm just kind of buying time and I'm not putting my pajama on and I'm not going to bed at all.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's so true.
Yeah. So learn to say something like, I'm going to ask you if you want this or that, and I'd like you to actually think about it. You can also use a lot of this type of phrasing when you're talking to them. Interesting. Let's think about it. Let's take a moment to really think about it or think this through. that helps them pause and not be reactive, and maybe apply or employ some other parts of them, which is really what we want, their executive thinking rather than their immediate impulse.
Yeah, that executive functioning is so important in development. But I'm also thinking that could be helpful when you're visiting with a specialist and you're like, can we try this or can we try that? And I want you to think about it before you answer my question. Like that feels like that would not just be a good strategy for working with kids, but also working with ourselves and how we ask ourselves questions, but also how we interact with other adults. Oh, I like that. I'm writing that down so that I can ask that to other people. So, what are some of the things, Dr. Siggie, that a child may feel like? What might be some of the things that they may feel when something's really hard? Like, what are normal things, normal reactions that a child will have when something feels unknown or scary? It's just because I think sometimes our kids' reactions, we think, we're doing it wrong because they reacted this way when really it's normal. I know we've talked a little bit about sometimes sibling disagreements, and sometimes what we magnify to be terrible is actually their normal reaction. So, give us an idea of like what might be some normal reactions that when parents see it, they're like, okay, this is normal. And then this is how we're going to move through that.
Right. So any type of separation that looks like anxiety, separation anxiety in any kind of form, so much of it is normal, even before bedtime, even before leaving them at school, even before walking out the door and they're staying with grandma or their best friend. I mean, learn to not immediately think, what's wrong with my child that they're having this moment? So separation anxiety is very normal. Feeling left out, feeling rejected or abandoned. We tend to also think that all these feelings have to rely on some traumatic experience. No, a lot of them are actually just wired into us, part of our attachment. You know, if we were not attached, we would have never experienced abandonment or rejection. So attachment is important. So we can't take one without the other. So learn to, I'm not saying that you don't want to handle it and help your child through, but a lot of it is normal. A baby crying, oh, I don't want them to feel rejected. You're not putting rejection into them, but you can't also stop them from crying because that's their natural way of expressing themselves. So when you think about it, you didn't really abandon your baby. The fact that maybe you left the room and they're crying, this is their experience. That experience is normal. So you can't prevent that experience by always being there because that's not normal either, right? So think like that. Again, rejection, abandonment, this separation anxiety. How much of it is just part of the human condition, things that we have to experience and learn to work through? And they're not necessarily either a problem or a trauma. I don't know.
We do. We think, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. You're making me think about so many things. Okay, because you brought it up, I want to talk about it. So, gentle parenting has gotten like a lot of press lately and how we react to certain situations. Tell me the best parts of, I guess, gentle parenting and maybe ways that we can sort of recalibrate as parents to help our kids grow in good resilience and dealing with hard things, but also in developing good, just healthy relationships with our kids.
Yeah. So gentle parenting has started with a really good idea in mind that has now has gone so far, we lost what it was aimed for. We wanted to give our children respect, be kind to them, and absolutely not physically harm them or even mentally and so on. So we started there. That's the gentleness. But I think that the word gentle, gentle, it's not necessarily the only way to respond and react and be in life no matter what. We can't just rely everything on gentleness. So I think that a lot of times parents think because of gentle parenting that they have to explain to their children everything and all the time and re-explain it and again, which ends up in us trying to sell something. Literally, we're trying to sell our agenda to them, and they're not buying because this is
because
not.
they're 3, right? Yeah.
Yes, they're 3, and this is not, a used car lot. I mean, we're not really needing to sell them on anything. We try to convince them, which is many times impossible because our rationale and their rationale very, very different. Ours is based on experience and knowledge and information, blah, 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 all that, past, future. Theirs is based on the moment in time, and they're being egocentric. So we try so hard to convince, to sell, to bargain, to negotiate. So a lot of times, one of the things I say, we don't just accommodate now, we over accommodate.
Right.
And what we want is, like I said, pity and empathy are not the same thing. So validation and accommodation are not the same thing. Just because I understand that my child really, really, really wants another cookie right now, I don't have to argue with them why they shouldn't and they can't and it's not right and it's not good. And for them to basically go, okay, they're not going to do it. So what I can do is just validate. And that's it, like literally end of story. I don't have to now overdo in order to accommodate them so they agree. I just need to go, wow, so hard to not have another cookie. I know, but I know. And by the way, wanting is okay. See, here's another thing. When we try to convince someone, we want them to not be or think the way that they are. Like, you shouldn't want a cookie because I'm explaining to you why it's wrong. That's not okay. So gentle parenting has done even some damage because now you're actually not being respectful or kind to your child at all. You're trying to undo who they are and what they are. Why do you want? How come? What's the matter? Why, that's not gentle. That's not respect. So,
And then we add even more stress to our lives as parents because
yes.
like boundaries are good. But also, I mean, I think ultimately we do want our kids to be able to be problem solvers. We want them to be autonomous. We want them to develop independence. And those things you unfortunately cannot just talk them into. Like they have to experience things in order for you to help teach the lesson. You can tell a kid not to touch the stove, but sometimes they have to touch it in order for you to be like, these are how we learn things. It's like the real natural consequences. So I like what you said there. So, how do you know, Dr. Siggie, if things are hard in your home and you are doing all the things? You have good support system, you feel like you are parenting as well as you can, but yet there's still some friction there. There's still some hard things. How do you know when it becomes normal, natural what you're doing and when you might need to invite someone else in to be like, I think I need a third party here, maybe counseling or therapy to help us go through this hard thing. And I'm thinking about things like it may be the grief over losing a sibling, or it may be just a really long extended stay. But sometimes you have to bring somebody in. How does a parent figure out if they need an assist or if it's something that they can do on their own?
Right. So one way to assess that is almost like looking at random, occasional versus chronic. So if you are seeing that your child is chronically struggling with the same thing over and over and over, it's not just a moment in time. We all have bad days, bad moments, bad situations, right? And our children do too. But when it's chronic, every single day, they are still in the same, whatever it is, feeling, behavior. Look at that and think, okay, when something is that chronic, maybe it does need a different kind of intervention. If it's more random and occasional, yeah, we can all sometimes just kind of sit there, like the nurse said to you, and go, let's just cry. Yeah,
Let's just do
yeah,
that. Yeah.
right. But if we're crying constantly and all the time, that's the difference. So it's not, obviously crying is not the only assessment, but look at your child, the randomness, the occasions that in which they're struggling, normal, constantly, all the time, no sort of end in sight. maybe it's time to kind of say, maybe we need another pair of eyes and understanding and support to know what to do here.
What do you think, Dr. Siggie, are like hallmarks or benchmarks of a kid that's developing normally? Like, if your kid is doing X, Y, and Z, you're probably doing it right. I mean, because I think we have this false notion that if our kids never get in trouble, if they never talk back, if they never have a tantrum, that clearly we're excellent parents. But then I got myself more than one child and I was like, oh, it's not me.
It's
It's you.
actually
It's us, yeah. So,
uh,
like, give people an idea of, like, what's a normal just child development as they're aging into independent young people? Like, what are some things that are, "Yep, that's normal." Because I think
yeah.
sometimes we see the internet and we feel like maybe we're doing it wrong when we're really not doing it wrong, or we hold up this false bar of expectation of what should be happening in our houses when we're really just seeing the highlight reel from somebody else. So, give us an idea of what's normal.
Yeah, so maybe we start with that bar of expectations, and you want to kind of look at your own family and your own children and gauge expectations according to them. Notice that they are functional, and functional meaning that they are doing well in some parts of their own lives. Because remember, it's not all about you. So your child still loves to play with whatever it is they're playing, or has whatever passion, or is curious and interested, or has a talent, or even just an engagement of some sort, right? Extracurricular activities, staying at school after hours just to play with their friends. These are actually good, healthy signs. Again, it doesn't mean that all children who do well in school are fine all the time or never get in trouble. There's other things, but functionality is a benchmark, definitely. It's kind of like a way to look at my child knows how to function in their own whatever pieces of life that they already have. And then, yes, if you feel like maybe there are some ways to recognize that maybe you need to look at something else. Like, for example, if a child is always good, it's not a good thing. Much like if a child is always in trouble, it's kind of the same. If they're, oh, they're so good, you're such a good boy, such a good girl. Yeah, it's also because no one is. And so we need balance, and we all need to have a little bit of our bad side every once in a while come out in order to learn through challenges, in order to create some conflicts so we can actually strengthen our own mental muscles. It doesn't, if everything is smooth as butter all the time, we're not working these muscles. So don't expect your child to just be a good boy, a good girl. And I'm not saying like, hey, what's wrong with you that you're just a good boy? But
Right.
yeah, like question that every once in a while. Do you sometimes, because especially if you have a child in a family that is more feisty, that tends to push the envelope, that tends to cause trouble, you may have other children that sort of like, I want nothing to do. I don't want to be like that. I see my parents are struggling. So they almost take the exact opposite. Extremes and opposites are not necessarily healthy.
No.
We always want some moderation. So if you know that you have one child that really kind of is the one that causes the turmoil, look at your other ones and say to them, by the way, I want you to know, yes, your brother, your sister, yeah, is a challenge. It doesn't mean you always have to be good. Don't feel sorry for
Mm,
me. Don't look
that's
at me
good.
and think, oh, my mom already is working so hard with this one. I'll be good. No, don't do that. Be whoever. And if you want to rebel or question or, I'm fine. I can handle it. I can take care of myself. I'm the big person here. So sometimes this is what we also have in a family dynamic. Back to the other question you were asking, for example, when do we know that the family needs additional support because I say the child is acting in such a way that is more chronic than random? A lot of times, this one child that acts out in a way that feels like we really need intervention is the child that actually brings the entire family into support. And everyone in the family needs, right? We know that, and we even have a term. The child that brings the family to therapy is usually just the identifier of other things that are going on. So sometimes I even thank that child for, causing problems, because now we can all talk about it, and they're never just the problem themselves. They're always a product of obviously their own personality, nature and nurture, and some family dynamics. So, don't assume your children are good. Functioning is wonderful, but if you have a really good child, look at them as well as you would be looking at your troublemaker.
I didn't think you were going to make me tear up. You weren't supposed to do that. I was doing fine until you said that. Sometimes somebody says something that just you need to hear. So I'm hoping that everyone else needed to hear that, but I needed to hear that. So let's talk a little bit about the internet and these sort of standards that people that do not live in our home give us on how we should be parenting. Dr. Siggie, how or what advice would you give to a parent who is discerning, like, is this person that I'm following on the internet healthy for me, or should I take a break because that's not healthy for me? It's setting unrealistic expectations for me and how I parent my children.
Yeah. Notice the anxiety that person brings in you. And it doesn't mean that they're causing you anxiety. It means that you have anxiety and you're seeking for that affirmation. Yeah, I'm supposed to be scared. There's all these horrible things and I need to worry about that. Yeah. So you want to know that we are obviously affected and influenced by other people, but a lot of times it's our own, whatever that is, need from within that leads us that way. So if you notice yourself scrolling through and looking for the people that scare you, that sort of like give you some panics, stress and anxiety, worry, like, yeah, you should be concerned about that. Know that you already are dealing with those components, and maybe you want to help yourself do something, because we don't need someone else matching our anxiety and then taking it to the next level. We want the opposite. So the answer is, find people that help you feel comforted. And again, not agree with everything, but somewhat give you comfort. Notice when you're scrolling how quickly you become more stressed, more depressed, maybe, right? Feeling even more triggered. And I will say this, I was just talking to my niece actually about it. I say, I'm part of it myself. I also get triggered by all the people that I am exposed to, because I already raised my children and I cannot go back and undo.
Right.
And it's triggering me still now. Like, oh, wait, did I do this? Was I, so all of that information is so much, too much to all of us. We all have to learn to tone it down somewhat and really find comfort versus stress and anxiety.
It's comforting to know that even the child development specialist gets triggered by the internet. So thank you for that. Like, well, we're all trying to do our best, and we just have so much access. Like, I'm sure that all those things were happening before, but I mean, one of my children was born like early 2000s, so the internet wasn't really that big of a deal. And then another one was born in 2014. Massive difference in how I was like, I didn't even know people cared about that, or I didn't even know people talked about that. And all of a sudden, you're right. The guilt that I'm looking back in the rearview mirror, like, oh man, I should have done that different. What would be your best advice, Dr. Siggie, for encouraging parents to be hopeful and resilient as they navigate hard things, whether it's the NICU stay or whether it's a difficult experience with a certain child? Maybe it's a diagnosis, or they're just going through a rough patch and they need some encouragement. How do you speak sort of into that hope and resiliency into parents to continue to keep doing the things and showing up every day?
Right. I think one is we really have to remind ourselves many times we have no choice. We can't check out. We can't leave the job, right? And those times that I don't want it anymore, I have to pull some more strength. It really is just the self-motivation and our own resilience. And obviously, so much has to do with the support. So if you feel you're isolated, if you begin to feel like it's all on me, we can't always help that feeling. By the way, it's kind of like abandonment and rejection. It can toy with us. It's not always just me, but we tend to sometimes feel like that. Always find some perspective and proportion from people that not dismiss, but kind of like that nurse. I love that. And I think this is what we all need every once in a while. Come here. Let's just cry. Good cry. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And then what? Right? There's life after love, right? What was the words of that song? It's kind of like when something ends, something else. There is still life after the cry. There is laughter after the cry. There is resilience, coping, thinking, figuring things out. So allow yourself. Remember, you're human. If you feel that guilt sets in way, way too much, now you're carrying something that is not actually helping. So know that it's very important to be aware, to almost like I say, look inward to what are your feelings. Try to ask yourself questions. What is it made of? Like truly, what is my anger made of? Yeah. Many times fear, panic, worry. Even the feeling of even guilt is sometimes made of shame, embarrassment, feeling sort of like left out. Maybe it's triggering something else from another time. So, look into these components and try to break them down and really see what's going on. A lot of times, that is what actually helps us just kind of regain hope all over again.
I think I had probably the best piece of advice that I got from a NICU mentor, which she looked at me and she said, Kathryn, it's not always going to be this hard.
Mm.
Because when the valley seems pretty deep, you think, I'm never going to
This
get out
is
of this
it.
valley. And I
Yeah.
needed her to say, like, it's not always, she said, not that the diagnosis may not get easier, but she said, but you're not going to continue to stay the same. Like you're going to either reach out for more help, you're going to do something different, you're going to build your own resiliency. But she's like, it's not always going to be this hard. So to have
Yeah.
someone sort of recognize that was huge. Oh my gosh, that was huge. Okay, I have
Yeah.
one more question for you, and then I'm going to let you go. If you could go back to, like, the Dr. Siggie of, like, when you first started parenting, what do you wish someone had told you about navigating parenthood?
Wow, that is a very good question. So here's what I can say. When I was parenting my children, I actually wasn't Dr. Siggie. I was mainly just Siggie. I was a teacher. I was going back to school. So I was doing, and yes, then I started parenting. I taught college. I mean, I was doing a lot of these things, but it wasn't just me constantly thinking what the books are saying or what my experience. I was still just a mom like everyone else. And I think what I mainly relied on back then is a really good, solid group of friends that felt like we are all in this together. We, a lot of times, just literally relied on one another. And I think that one of the things, sometimes I even say something so simple. Children go to preschool so their parents can find support system for themselves.
Yes.
Right? Some of your
Yes.
best friends are the ones that you meet when your children are in preschool because you're so in the thick of it, but everybody's in the same boat. So I think that group, like your cohort, the people that are going through the same thing at the same time, a lot of times are your foundation. So again, you need to know, to stay away from the ones that don't make you feel good as a parent, but the ones that actually lift you and you lift them and give each other advice. And I guarantee you, I have stored into my memory certain things about a friend that said this in a moment in time, like you say, like the nurse, and it was like, wow, even about my feisty child, where my best friend said to me, you know that he's actually normal. It's your other one that's too good, that's not normal. And I was like, what?
Good friends make a huge difference.
Yeah, or even sometimes just any type of encouragement that we can give each other when we can like each other's children and enjoy their company and so on and so forth. So I would say rely also on that. Make sure that you're not surrounding yourself with a lot of judgment and criticism, which back to the internet, so much comes from there, right? Yes. So not just your immediate group of, who is in your village that can provide comfort, not just judgment, and real support. Just like, so hard. We're all in this together. Many times, basically, me and my friends just sat there, watched our kids run around and fall and get into, we're just kind of like, wow, this is tough. But we are in this together. Yeah. I think that as humans, this is what humans need. We can't survive on our own. So that village, whatever that village is very, very important.
I love having you on the podcast. You're so wise and confident, but also so empathetic of all the trials and tribulations that we go through in raising our kids. Dr. Siggie, thanks for being here. Thanks, y'all, so much for listening. That was a fantastic conversation. I hope that you'll do me a favor. If you love today's episode, please share it with a friend. You can also review over on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. You can also give us a listen and a watch over on YouTube. It's how we reach more NICU professionals. Today's podcast episode is sponsored by Reckitt Mead Johnson, whose mission is to nourish the world's children for the best start in life. For more than a century, they have led the way in developing safe, high-quality, innovative nutrition products and continue to push the boundaries of nutritional knowledge with consistent, strong investments in scientific exploration.